Welcome to the first iTeach teaching tip of the week. Every week I'll be presenting a small task or teaching activity that can help students to engage with your subject. This week we'll be looking at a technique called ThinkPairShare. Why would you want to use this technique? The ThinkPairShare technique has been proven to improve critical thinking in tertiary courses. Not only does it allow students to rehearse their answers privately and in small groups, but it also aids problem solving, academic achievement and interest in learning. Importantly, the technique makes each student accountable for their contribution, as they must speak during the pair stage of the activity. Moreover, it is engaging for all students, as quieter students get a chance to share in pairs and everyone can be involved, without having to present in front of the class. Lastly, it is easy and quick for the lecturer to prepare and can be done on the spot. Firstly, here is an overview of the technique. 1. You need to decide on the target content. 2. Describe the strategy to the class. 3. Display the question or prompt to the class. 4. Get the students to think about the question or prompt. 5. Get student pairs to discuss the question or prompt. 6. Get the students to share their ideas with the class. We will now look at these steps in more detail. The first step is to decide on the target content. The target content can be any readings, theories or key ideas related to your subject. It can also be case studies or controversial issues related to the content. Once you have decided on the target content, you need to formulate a series of questions or prompts that will get students to think about the content. A good idea is to use broad, open-ended questions with multiple and/or conflicting responses. The more open-ended the question or prompt, the better the class discussion. The second step is to describe the strategy to the class. This is important so that the students understand the process and understand why they are doing the task. A good way to describe the process to the class is to use the following slide. It provides a clear, generic description of the task that is easy for the students to understand. In addition to describing the task, it can also be helpful to provide the students with a scaffold. This scaffold provides students with space to record their ideas and is a good way for you to monitor student participation and understanding during the task. The first column is space for the students to write down the question or prompt. I encourage you to use this step as it forces the students to engage closely with the question or prompt so that they can clarify any issues with the question. The second column is space for students to write ideas during the think part of the activity. The third column is space for students to write their partner's ideas during the pair part of the activity. The fourth column is space for students to write the ideas of other class members during the share part of the activity. Once you have given out the scaffold, you need to explain the purpose of the activity to the students. This is vital because it will help them see the reason behind the activity so that they can fully engage during the task. Specifically, this technique is good for generating ideas about topics and getting students to articulate their prior knowledge about a topic. The third step is to display the question or prompt to the class. This can be done on PowerPoint or just by writing the question on the board. It is important that all students can clearly see the question so that it can be written down in the first column of the scaffold. If you were using a case study, you might only get the students to write down the key points rather than a whole paragraph. But if it is a short question or prompt, then they can write down the whole thing. The fourth step is to get the students to think about the question or prompt. This can go between 1 and 3 minutes depending on the complexity of the question or prompt. For instance, a warm-up question might need 30 seconds to a minute, while a case study might need 3 or more minutes for students to read and think about the issues involved. I like to play Jeopardy thinking music during this stage, as it is an auditory reminder for the students not to talk, and is a fun reminder of the purpose of the task. During this time, the students should be encouraged to record their ideas in the second column of the scaffold. This should be done in dot point form rather than full sentences. The fifth step is to get the students to discuss the question or prompts in pairs. This normally takes between 2 and 5 minutes depending on the question or prompts. For example, I might only allow 2 or 3 minutes for a warm-up prompt, but would probably allow around 5 minutes for a controversial or complex issue. Once again, you might allow over 5 minutes if you use a case study. The first time you do the activity with the class, I like to specify who goes first and remind the students to swap turns halfway through the time. While this may seem too detailed, it does prevent more talkative students from dominating, thus allowing all students to be involved. Another good hint is to make the students record their partner's idea in the scaffold. This encourages them to listen actively rather than passively sit there during their partner's turn. It also makes them engage with alternative points of view. Also, if the students agree or finish quickly, get them to ask clarifying or probing questions to encourage more critical thinking. This also provides an opportunity for you to walk around a room and ask the students what they thought, so you can check their understanding. The sixth step is to get students to share their ideas with the class. This can be a short warm-up for questions or prompts and a bit longer for case studies or complex issues that have multiple points of view. I like to pick out students to share their ideas and also ask them to share their partner's ideas. This forces the students to listen and understand other perspectives and encourages engagement during the listening part of the task. Once again, I get the students to write down 2 or 3 new ideas they heard during the class discussion in the scaffold. This provides them with further different perspectives and is a way to get students to engage in this part of the task rather than once again sitting passively. You can then repeat the process for the next question or prompt. There are a few variations you can use with this task. Firstly, you can choose to either use the scaffold or just get students to discuss ideas without a scaffold. The benefit of this technique is that if you don't plan to use it, you can do the activity without the scaffold, but the scaffold does help the students focus on the task. Another variation can be in the sharing phase of the task. That is, you can get the pairs to share their ideas with other pairs or in larger groups. This can be helpful if there are multiple points of view or if the topic is particularly controversial. You can then see if groups can come to a consensus about the topic. Lastly, I like to get the students to summarise their ideas at the end of the task. This can be a written summary or even just getting students to verbalise what they have learned from the discussion. The following links can be useful when doing the task. The first is the thinking music I use during the think phase of the task. The second is an online stopwatch to time each step. This timer is helpful as it allows students to gauge how much time they have left. Lastly, there are some websites with resources and further explanations about the technique. Thank you for listening to this iTeach tip, and we look forward to bringing you more in the future.